It's our duty as Americans to fight for our country and to keep it, true to serving its people. And when it doesn't do that, it's immoral not to stand up and say something.
To humanize the markets and to have true participatory democracy, bottom-up democracy.
If we are serious about rebuilding the American middle class, we need to develop a political movement which once again is prepared to take on and defeat a ruling class whose greed is destroying our nation.
Born from private property, the political economy that is capitalism divides society into two classes. By exploitation and estrangement, these classes become further designated as masters of labor and laborers. The engine of this political economy is greed and competition.
Once upon a time, work was real and authentic. Farmers raised crops, and craftsmen made goods with their own hands. But then, capitalism was invented, and darkness spread across the land as the smokestacks of the Industrial Revolution covered everything in soot. The capitalists became ever more skilled at extracting productivity from workers and pocketing the gains from their labor.
So I moved there in July of 2011, and a few months later, Occupy Wall Street breaks out. And it's all over the news. And I had a lot of sympathy with them at first. I mean, hundreds of millions of people had lost their jobs around the world. All kinds of disasters were happening because of the recklessness and even criminality of some people in the financial sector. So I had a lot of sympathy for that. And I was teaching a business ethics course. And we'd go through case after case of businesses doing all these terrible things and pressing their employees to do all these terrible things. And most of them were legal. So, I'm immersed in all of this negative stuff about business. And I see that there's some truth to story one. But at the same time, everyone around me in the business school is talking about creating value, creating value. It's all about creating value. And at first, business has a lot of buzzwords, and I'm, creating value. So, I sort of write it off as, But then, as I start reading about the history of capitalism, and I start reading Adam Smith, and then I see this graph, and this just changed me forever. This is the most amazing graph I have ever seen. This is a graph of GDP per capita in constant $1990. So what you see here is that everybody in the world was living on about $400 a year. That's a little over $1 a day. Just about everybody is living at starvation wages for thousands of years. And you can see Western Europe bumps up just a little bit after 1500 because you get mercantile capitalism. You're moving stuff around, so Europe gets a little wealthier. But it's not until you get the Industrial Revolution, it's not until you get industrial capitalism, which makes stuff, huge amounts of stuff cheaply, that you get things really taking off. The West skyrockets, especially America. And if that transition, if that transformation in just 150 years doesn't blow you away, look what happened in the next 50 years. Okay? And that data only goes up to the year 2000. So when you really see this, when you appreciate this, when you see what happens, you realize that creating value isn't just a buzzword.
You see, the bottom line here is if you want to make money, you have to start creating value. Money is exchanged between parties when one party views that the other person has value. They have something that they want, need, or desire. That is what compels people to say, you know what, I'm going to open up my wallet, or I'm going to open up my purse, and I'm going to give you money.
If you have a great leader, if you have a great thinker, you want to reward them so they keep thinking and they keep educating so they can tell you something. It's not a reward for their intrinsic being. It's a calculated move on your part to suck everything out of them that's valuable as fast as you can. Logically cynical idea.
So when you really see this, when you appreciate this, when you see what happens, you realize that creating value isn't just a buzzword, it's actually a moral imperative. Because when you get this process going in previously poor countries, this is what happens to poverty. So in 1820, it's estimated that about 95% of the people on this planet were living on around $1.25 a day of current value. And by 2010, it's down to 21%. And it's still dropping rapidly. Can you imagine that? Poverty has gone from being the state of almost everybody to being, it will soon be the state of very few people. This is arguably the most important event in human history. But because it was spread out over 200 years, a lot of people seem to have missed it.
There's so many good things going on in the world right now. They're almost miraculous. So, for example, between the year 2000 and 2012, the level of absolute poverty in the world was cut by 50%. That was the fastest rate of improvement by a large margin in human history. It was 3 years faster than the most optimistic projections had suggested.
The period in which you had the greatest improvement in the lot of the ordinary man was the period of the 19th and early 20th century. Those of us in this room are the heirs of that. We benefited from the way in which our parents and our grandparents were able to come here. And by virtue of the freedom that was offered to them, were able to make a better life for themselves and them and us. But next, if you look...
So you hear the egalitarian clarion call everywhere. Everything should be equal. Everything should be equally distributed. We should strive for equity. It's like wrong, especially if you're a conservative.